I came home to grab my keys, but overheard my wife's secret call with her lover. The truth destroyed me. I wasn't supposed to be home. That's the part that messes with me the most. If I hadn't forgotten my keys, maybe I'd still be living in ignorance, believing my wife was the person I thought she was. Maybe I'd still be looking at her like she was the best thing that ever happened to me. But no, fate had other plans. It was a Tuesday, middle of the day. I had stepped out to run some errands, and as I got to my car, I patted my pockets. Empty. I checked the driver's seat, the dashboard, nothing. That's when I realized I left them inside. Annoyed, I turned back. I was already walking up the steps when I heard her voice. Jean. My wife of 6 years. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was on the phone with one of her girlfriends, gossiping about some nonsense. But then I caught a name that sent my stomach plummeting. Andy, I swear he has no idea. He's clueless. I froze at the front door, my hand hovering over the knob. Andy. That name hit me like a punch in the gut. Andy was Pat's husband. Pat, Jean's best friend. We had double dates with them. I shook his damn hand at our barbecue last weekend. Jean's voice was laughing light, like this was some kind of joke. He still thinks I'm working late when I'm really with you. Can you believe that? I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My own wife, standing in our home, laughing about how stupid I was. My fingers tightened on the knob, but I didn't push the door open. I should have. I should have barged in right then, but something held me back. I needed to hear it all. Andy's voice came through the speaker, muffled but clear enough. You sure he won't catch on? Last time, I thought he was looking at me weird. Jean snorted. Please, he's too trusting. He'd never suspect me of cheating. That's why this works so well. I felt sick. My stomach twisted and my throat went dry. Trusting. That's what she called it? I had built a life with her. I had loved her with everything I had. And here she was, mocking me, making plans with another man like I was some joke. I pulled my phone out, my hands shaking. I needed proof. If I stormed in now, she'd lie. I knew she would. Jean was good at lying. I took a deep breath and hit record. Her voice kept going, every word a dagger to my gut. He'd never leave me, you know? He's too loyal. Even if he found out, he'd probably beg me to stay. That was it. That was the moment something in me snapped. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to be smart. If she thought I was clueless, I'd let her keep thinking that. I took a step back from the door, my breathing shallow. I needed a plan. I needed evidence. I wasn't just going to walk into this blind. And I knew exactly who could help me. I walked back to my car, sat there gripping the steering wheel, and dialed the one person I could trust with this, Alan. Alan was an old buddy from college, and he owned a security company. If there was anyone who could help me get the truth, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. Hey man, what's up? I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. I need a favor. And I need you to keep this between us. Alan hesitated for only a second. Are you okay? Not even close. I told him everything. And by the time I hung up, I had a plan. Jean thought I was blind. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to Jean breathing next to me like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon laughing about how easy I was to fool. I could still hear her words echoing in my head. He'd never leave me, you know? He's too loyal. Loyalty. That's what she thought of me. Like I was some kind of pet that would stay no matter what she did. I turned my head and looked at her. She was sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. Meanwhile, my whole life had just imploded. I had to be smart. Storming in and screaming wouldn't do anything. She'd lie, gaslight, cry, whatever she needed to do to flip the situation. No, I needed her caught. So first thing in the morning, I drove over to Alan's office. He took one look at me and knew something was wrong. Jesus, man. You look like hell. I dropped into the chair across from him. Jean's cheating on me. Alan let out a long breath. Damn. You sure? I pulled out my phone, hit play, and slid it across the desk. Jean's voice filled the room. He has no idea. He's clueless. Alan listened without saying a word. By the time the recording ended, his face was stone cold. You all right, he said, setting the phone down. What do you need? Proof. Solid proof. I don't want her wiggling out of this. Alan nodded. I can set up cameras. Audio recording. Even GPS tracking if you need it. You want a PI involved? I shook my head. Not yet. Let's start with surveillance first. Alan leaned forward. Listen, man, I gotta ask. What's your endgame here? You planning to confront her? Divorce? What? I exhaled, rubbing my face. I hadn't even thought that far. I don't know yet. But I want options. Alan clapped a hand on my shoulder. Then let's get to work. The setup? That night, Alan came over under the pretense of having a few drinks. Jean greeted him like nothing was wrong, smiling and laughing, completely unaware that he was there to help take her down. After she went to bed, Alan and I got to work. A small, motion-activated camera in the bedroom, hidden in the smoke detector. Another in the living room, disguised as a phone charger. Audio recorders in key locations, her car, the kitchen, even her purse. By the time Alan left, my house was wired. I went to bed knowing that the next time she slipped up, I'd have everything I needed. The first hit? It didn't take long. The very next day, Jean came home late. Again. She gave me the same tired excuse, work ran over, babe. I'm exhausted. Then she went to take a shower. I waited until she was asleep before checking the footage. And there it was. In the living room, she stood by the door, whispering into her phone. I miss you too. Thursday? Yeah, I'll tell him I'm going to Pat's. I clenched my jaw. Thursday. That gave me 2 days. 2 days to prepare. I barely spoke to Jean over the next 2 days. She didn't even notice. She was too busy texting on her phone, smiling at whatever Andy was saying. I played along, acted normal. I even asked her about her plans with Pat on Thursday. She didn't hesitate. Yeah, we're doing a wine night at her place. Just us girls. She didn't even blink when she lied to my face. I nodded. They have fun. She kissed my cheek and went back to scrolling through her phone. I walked out of the room, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. She had no idea. No idea that I had seen the footage of her whispering to Andy, that I had her little A Girl's Night Gone tape. She thought I was clueless. Fine. Let her keep thinking that. The tracker. Thursday morning, before Jean left for work, I made my move. Alan had hooked me up with a GPS tracker. Tiny, magnetic, easy to hide. I slipped it under the rear bumper of her car while she was in the shower. It took less than 10 seconds. Now, I could follow her without leaving my house. I spent the whole day watching that little red dot on my phone. It moved to her office in the morning, stayed there until 5, then started heading toward Pat's house. For a second, my stomach twisted. Could she actually be telling the truth? Maybe she really was going to Pat's. Maybe. Then, right before she reached Pat's street, the red dot changed direction. I exhaled sharply. There it was. She wasn't going to Pat's. She was going to him. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The hotel. I followed the GPS all the way across town to a motel. Not even a nice one. Just some cheap, rundown place on the outskirts. Figures. I parked a few streets down and waited, my heart pounding. 5 minutes later, Jean's car pulled into the lot. She stepped out, dressed like she had taken extra time on her appearance. Hair done, makeup flawless, tight jeans, high heels, nothing like the exhausted wife she pretended to be around me. Then, from the other side of the lot, Andy appeared. He walked right up to her, grabbed her waist and kissed her. That was it. That was all I needed. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to storm in there. I wasn't going to make a scene. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, and hit record. Jean and Andy, standing in the parking lot of a cheap motel, wrapped up in each other. Laughing. Kissing. Like they didn't have a care in the world. Then they disappeared inside together. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the anger boil up inside me. I had my proof. I had everything. Now, it was time to make my move. I drove home in complete silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Jean and Andy. At a motel. It didn't even hurt the way I expected. The pain had burned out, replaced by something colder. Something sharper. I wasn't just going to leave. No. I was going to ruin them. Locking down my assets? First thing I did when I got home? Called my lawyer. I explained everything, told him about the affair, the proof I had, and that I wanted to protect myself. Jean and I had a house, joint accounts, shared assets. If I didn't act fast, she could try to bleed me dry in a divorce. You need to move your money, my lawyer said. Today. So I did. Opened a new bank account in my name only. Transferred my savings over. Made sure Jean had no access. Then I changed the passwords on everything, my personal accounts, my investments, even my email. Jean wasn't going to get a single cent from me. The fake trip. The next part of my plan? Making sure Jean felt comfortable. That night, I acted like nothing was wrong. I even brought up a last-minute work trip. Hey babe, my boss wants me to go out of town for a few days. I'll be leaving Friday night. Jean barely looked up from her phone. Oh, okay. When are you back? Sunday. She smiled too easily. I'll miss you. Liar. She probably thought she had a free weekend with Andy. That was exactly what I wanted her to think. I kissed her goodnight, rolled over, and stared at the ceiling. She had no idea that I was about to rip her whole world apart. Calling Pat. Andy's wife, Pat, had no idea her husband was a cheating piece of garbage. But she was about to find out. The next morning I gave her a call. She answered after a few rings, sounding cheerful. Hey. What's up? I took a deep breath. Pat. I need to tell you something. And I have proof. Silence. Then, cautiously, okay? It's about Andy and Jean. The second I said their names together, I heard her breath catch. Come over, she said. Then now. The bomb drops. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Pat's living room, watching her face as I played the video. Her expression went from confusion to shock to pure, shaking rage. That son of a, she cut herself off, gripping her temples. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I handed her my phone. You can keep the videos. Do whatever you want with them. She exhaled slowly, eyes burning. I'll do something with them. I didn't ask what she meant. But I knew Andy was about to have one hell of a night. And Jean? Her time was coming. Friday night came faster than I expected. Jean kissed me goodbye at the door, acting all sweet, like she wasn't about to spend the weekend screwing another man. Drive safe, babe, she said, wrapping her arms around my neck. Call me when you get there. I forced myself to smile. Of course. Then I grabbed my bag, an empty duffel, just for show, and walked out. I got in my car, backed out of the driveway, and drove 2 blocks down. Then I parked and waited. 15 minutes later, Jean's car pulled out of the driveway. She didn't waste any time. I watched as she sped off, heading toward Andy. Hook. Line. Sinker. The hotel, round 2. I already knew where she was going. Same cheap motel. Same room. Only this time I wasn't alone. Pat was parked a few spots away, gripping her steering wheel so tight I thought she might snap it in half. She had spent the whole day getting her ducks in a row, calling a lawyer, securing her finances, even packing up some of Andy's stuff. Now she was just waiting. And so was I. We didn't have to wait long. Jean pulled in first. A minute later, Andy arrived. They met in the parking lot, laughing like two teenagers sneaking around behind the bleachers. I hit record. Andy pulled Jean in for a deep kiss before leading her inside. Pat let out a slow, controlled breath. Let's give them a little time to settle in. She was eerily calm. I respected it. 30 minutes passed. Then Pat turned to me. You ready? I nodded. Let's end this. The confrontation. We walked straight into the motel lobby. The guy at the front desk barely looked up. Pat slapped a $50 bill on the counter. What room did that couple just check into? The guy hesitated. Ma'am, Pat slammed another $50 down. Then now. He swallowed and handed over the key. Room 214. I followed her up the stairs, my heartbeat pounding. We stopped outside room 214. Voices leaked through the door, soft giggles, murmured words. Pat turned to me. Down 3. I nodded. She counted down. 1, 2, 3. She threw the door open. Jean's worst nightmare. I will never forget the look on Jean's face. She was on the bed, half-dressed, straddling Andy. Her eyes locked onto me, and for a second, she looked like she had seen a ghost. What are you doing here? She stammered, scrambling off Andy, yanking a sheet around herself. Andy, to his credit, reacted faster. He jumped up, face pale. Hey man, listen. Pat slapped him so hard the sound echoed. Don't you hey man him, you lying piece of garbage, she shrieked. How long, Andy? How long? Jean was still staring at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Babe, I can explain. I held up my phone, still recording. No need. I already have all the explanation I need. Her face crumpled. Please, just let me. I turned to Pat. You want to take over? Pat didn't even hesitate. She unloaded. You pathetic excuse for a man. You had everything. A wife who loved you. A home. And you threw it all away for this? She gestured at Jean like she was nothing. Andy tried to grab her arms. Pat, just calm down. She shoved him so hard he almost fell. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. Then she turned to Jean. Dan, you? You're disgusting. You sat in my house, smiled in my face, played with my kids, and the whole time you were sleeping with my husband? Jean burst into tears. It just happened. It didn't just happen. Pat roared. You made choices. You lied. And now? You get nothing. I exhaled and slipped my phone back into my pocket. I think that about wraps this up. Jean lunged for me. Wait. Please. Let's just talk. I stepped back. No, Jean. We're done. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her sobbing in a cheap motel room, her whole world falling apart. And I didn't feel a single ounce of sympathy. The second I stepped out of that motel room, I felt free. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, the weight pressing down on my chest lifted. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, recorded it with my own hands, and now? Jean had nothing left to hide behind. I walked straight to my car without looking back. I could still hear Pat screaming inside, tearing into Andy like a woman possessed. Good. Let her destroy him. I got in, shut the door, and just sat there. It was over. Jean was done. But I wasn't finished yet. The fallout begins. By the time I got home, my phone was already blowing up. 15 missed calls from Jean. 7 texts. 3 voicemails. I didn't bother reading them. Instead, I sent one message. Me, I know everything. We're done. Don't come home tonight. Then I blocked her number. 5 minutes later, I heard her car screech into the driveway. I sighed. Of course. Jean's meltdown. I didn't even make it to the front door before she was there, pounding on it. Let me in, she screamed. Please, just talk to me. I opened it, just enough to step outside and close it behind me. But what's there to talk about, Jean? She was a mess. Her hair was tangled, mascara running, and she was still wearing the same half-unbuttoned shirt from the motel. It wasn't what it looked like, she started, voice shaking. I actually laughed. Oh yeah? Because it looked like you were screwing my friend's husband. She grabbed my arm. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. The mistake? I repeated. Jean, you planned this. You lied to me. You laughed about it behind my back. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. She shook her head frantically. No, I'm still your wife. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I cut her off. Jean, I don't want to fix this. Her whole body froze. Like she hadn't actually considered that I wouldn't forgive her. Oh wait, what? She whispered. I let out a slow breath. I don't love you anymore. Her face crumpled. No, you do. You love me, we're just going through a rough patch. Jean, you slept with another man. Repeatedly. You laughed at me behind my back. You called me stupid. You used me. I don't love you anymore. She started hyperventilating. No. You're my husband. We're supposed to be together. Please don't do this. I stepped back. It's already done. Then I turned and walked inside. She collapsed onto the porch sobbing. And I locked the door. Collateral damage. Over the next few days, the fallout exploded. Pat kicked Andy out of their house. She filed for divorce immediately. Turns out, Andy had been using her money to book his little motel dates. She froze all their accounts before he could touch another dime. Jean had nowhere to go. Pat refused to take her in. Her parents lived in another state, and she had no close friends left. She ended up crashing at a cheap Airbnb, calling me every day from different numbers. I ignored every single one. Everyone found out. Pat wasn't quiet about what happened. She told our entire friend group. Jean went from being everyone's sweetheart to a complete outcast overnight. Even her boss found out. Apparently, she had been sneaking out during work hours to meet up with Andy. Someone tipped off HR, and just like that, she was fired. I should have felt bad. I didn't. The final nail. A week later, I served Jean divorce papers. I met her at a coffee shop. She looked awful. Bags under her eyes, hair unwashed like she hadn't slept in days. She stared at the papers, hands trembling. You really won't take me back? I shook my head. Never. She swallowed hard, then whispered, I ruined everything, didn't I? I didn't answer. She already knew. Then I stood up, left the papers on the table and walked out. Jean was officially out of my life. And I was finally free. Jean didn't sign the divorce papers right away. I knew she wouldn't. For the first few days, she tried everything to get me back. Love bombing. She sent me long, emotional texts about our beautiful life together, and how she couldn't live without me. Fake promises. I'll do anything. We can go to therapy. I'll prove I love you. Guilt trips. I made a mistake, but don't I deserve a second chance? I ignored every single one. Then, when none of that worked, she switched tactics. The anger phase. A week after I handed her the divorce papers, I got a message from an unknown number. Jean, you think you're so perfect? Like you never made mistakes? I smirked. Ah, there it was. The victim act was over. Then came another text. Jean, if you weren't so emotionally distant, maybe I wouldn't have needed Andy in the first place. There it was. Blaming me. I didn't bother responding. But she wasn't done. That night, I got a call from Alan. Dude. Jean just posted some crazy stuff about you online. I pulled up Facebook and saw it. A long, pathetic post about how I had abandoned her, how I was a cold and cruel, and how she had made a mistake but still loved me so much. Comments were split. Half of them were sympathy seekers telling her, You deserve a second chance. The other half? People who already knew the truth. Pat jumped in first. Pat, don't act innocent, Jean. You weren't abandoned. You were caught cheating. Repeatedly. You lied, laughed about it, and got caught. Own it. Then our mutual friends started chiming in. Josh, yeah, I don't remember you feeling so in love when you were sleeping with Andy behind his back. Katie, didn't you literally call your husband clueless while planning a weekend getaway with another man? Just asking. Within an hour, Jean deleted the post. I could only imagine the meltdown she was having. The last attempt. A few days later, I came home late and found Jean sitting on my front porch. She looked wrecked. Her hair was a mess, her eyes swollen from crying, and she was hugging her knees like a lost child. I sighed. Jean, you can't be here? She looked up at me, her face completely broken. Please, just hear me out. I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. You have 5 minutes. She sniffled, wiped her face, and whispered, I don't know who I am without you. I didn't say anything. She kept going. I know I ruined everything. I know I don't deserve you. But I don't know how to move on. I don't know how to wake up and not have you in my life. Her voice cracked. Please don't hate me forever. I took a deep breath, then crouched down so we were eye level. Jean. I don't hate you. She blinked, surprised. I just don't care anymore. Her whole body shook. I stood up, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Before I closed it, I looked at her one last time. Sign the papers, Jean. Move on. Then I shut the door. She didn't knock. She didn't scream. She just sat there for a few minutes, then quietly walked away. Signing the dotted line. 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. Jean had finally signed the divorce papers. No notes. No extra messages. Just her signature. It was officially over. And for the first time in months, I felt nothing but peace. The day the divorce was finalized, I expected to feel something: anger, sadness, maybe even regret. But all I felt was relief. Jean was gone. No more pretending. No more lies. No more waking up next to someone who saw me as nothing but a fool. I was finally free. Jean's life falls apart. Meanwhile, Jean was spiraling. I didn't go looking for updates, but they found me anyway. She was still unemployed. Turns out, her industry was small and word got around. No one wanted to hire someone with integrity issues. She was living out of a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. The nice lifestyle she enjoyed? Gone. She couldn't afford it without my income backing her up. She lost most of our mutual friends. The people who once adored her wanted nothing to do with her. The only ones who stuck around were people who didn't care about loyalty or had their own secrets to hide. The kicker? Andy didn't take her in. The man she blew up her marriage for ghosted her as soon as Pat kicked him out. From what I heard, he tried to reconcile with his wife at first, promised her it was just a fling, that he had made a mistake. Pat laughed in his face and cleaned him out. She got the house. She got the car. She got everything. Andy? He moved into a cheap rental, probably thinking he could have Jean as a backup plan. But Jean must have realized too late that he was never serious about her. Now? She was alone. The final message. One night, a few weeks after the papers were signed, I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't even have to guess who it was. Jean, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you. Just because I know I can never fix what I did. I hope one day you can forgive me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. No response. No closure for her. Just silence. She had already taken enough of my life. I wasn't giving her any more. New beginnings. As for me, I started living again. Got back into old hobbies. I picked up my guitar again, something I hadn't touched in years. Went out with friends. People who actually cared about me, who stuck around even after everything went down. Started dating. Nothing serious yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about meeting someone new. Life was good. Jean thought I would beg her to stay. She thought I would never leave. But she was wrong. And now? I was finally happy that I thought I was done with Jean. Thought I'd never have to see her again. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. Running into the past. It happened at the grocery store. I was walking down the aisles, minding my own business, grabbing some things for the weekend. It was just another normal day. Until I turned a corner and there she was. Jean. She looked rough. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. She had lost weight, but not in a healthy way. She just looked exhausted. And when she saw me, she froze. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just stared. Then she forced a weak smile. Hey. I didn't respond. I just nodded and reached for a carton of eggs. She took a small step closer. How have you been? I glanced at her, then back at the shelves. Good. She let out a breath, almost like she had been hoping for a different answer. That's good. You look good. I didn't return the compliment. Jean swallowed, shifting from foot to foot. I miss you. I finally turned to her, meeting her eyes. Jean, you don't miss me. You miss what I did for you. Her face crumpled. That's not true. It is. I cut her off. You miss the stability. The security. The person who would have done anything for you. She looked away, blinking fast. I loved you, Jean. I really did. But you killed that. And I'm never going back. She wiped at her eyes, trying to hold herself together. I know. She stopped, exhaling sharply. I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. Then I grabbed my groceries and walked away. And this time? She didn't follow. The final goodbye. I haven't seen or heard from Jean since that day. And I don't need to. That moment in the grocery store? That was the real closure. Not the divorce. Not the text she sent. It was looking her in the eyes and realizing. I felt nothing. No love. No anger. No resentment. Just peace. Jean was a chapter of my life. A painful one, sure. But one that's long over. And now? I'm writing a new story. Life moved on. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living. Finding myself again. When I was with Jean, I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost. I spent so much time trying to be the perfect husband, the stable provider, the guy who would never leave, that I forgot who I was before all of it. Now? I was finally rebuilding. I traveled. Took a solo trip to the mountains, just me and my thoughts. First time in forever that I wasn't worrying about someone else. I reconnected with old friends. People Jean had slowly pushed out of my life. Turns out, they had been waiting for me to wake up and see the truth. I started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to just be out there. Meeting people. Enjoying life. And the best part? I was doing all of this on my terms. Jean's chapter was closed. Every now and then, I'd hear little updates about Jean. She moved to a smaller apartment, still struggling to find steady work. She tried to mend broken friendships, but most people had already written her off. The last thing I heard? She was still alone. Andy had disappeared. Pat wanted nothing to do with her. And the friends who once hyped her up had all moved on. It wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her. I just didn't care. The best revenge? Living well. People ask me if I ever got revenge. If I ever made Jean and Andy pay for what they did. And my answer is simple. I didn't have to. Jean lost everything on her own. Me? I got my life back. I got my freedom. And at the end of the day, that's the best revenge of all. Because while Jean is stuck in the mess she made, I'm out here thriving. And that? That feels pretty damn good. The end. Thanks for sticking with me through this. Feels good to finally get it all out.